Last spring, I rooted 11 cuttings off a single rosemary plant, using nothing but a glass of water and one thing I already had in my kitchen cabinet. 11 new plants from one. Total cost, about a nickel. For years, I bought those little tubs of rooting powder at the garden store, and honestly, half my cuttings still rotted before they ever grew a root. Then Gloria showed me what she'd been using on her balcony for 2 decades, and it's sitting in your pantry right now. I'm going to walk you through exactly how I do it in 4 steps, start to finished cutting. And stick around to the end, because there's one type of cutting that almost never works in plain water, and I'll show you the small change that fixes it. 11 rosemary plants, off one parent, last spring. Those little starter pots run $2 to $3 a piece at my garden store, so that's $30-some of rosemary I grew on a windowsill for the cost of about a nickel's worth of honey. That's real. I weighed every one of them, potted them up, and handed 6 off to neighbors. Here's where most people go wrong. They buy a tub of rooting powder, dip a bare stem, drop it in a glass of plain water, and walk away. 2 weeks later, the bottom of that stem is brown and mushy. It rotted before it ever had a chance to root. The water itself was the problem. I'm going to walk you through this in 4 steps, from a fresh cutting to a rooted plant ready for soil. And stick around to the end, because there's one type of cutting that almost never works in plain water, and I'll show you the small change that fixes it every time. Step 1. Take your cutting. This is where the whole thing is won or lost, and it takes about 30 seconds once you know what you're looking for. You want healthy, non-flowering growth. The soft, green, actively growing tips near the end of a branch, not the old gray woody stuff down near the base. Look for a stem about 4 to 6 inches long. Any shorter than that, and there isn't enough plant to work with. Any longer, and the cutting struggles to push water all the way up to the top, while it's also trying to grow roots from the bottom. Make your cut right below a leaf node. That node is the little bump where a leaf joins the stem, and it's exactly where the roots are going to come from. So you want it down in the water, cut at a 45-degree angle instead of straight across. The angle gives you more surface area for roots to form along, and it keeps the bottom of the stem from sitting flat and sealed against the glass. Here's a small thing Gloria taught me that makes a real difference. Take your cuttings in the morning. That's when the stems are full of water and firm before the afternoon heat pulls all the moisture out of them. A rosemary tip cut at 2 o'clock on a hot July afternoon is already half wilted before it hits the glass. A morning cutting goes in plump and strong, and it roots faster for it. Now, strip the lower leaves, run your fingers down the bottom 2/3 of the stem, and pull every leaf off, so only the top 2 or 3 are left. Any leaf that ends up underwater is going to rot and foul the whole jar. The mistake I made for years was grabbing whatever stem looked nice. And half the time, that was a stem with flower buds on it or a piece of hard woody growth. A flowering stem pours all its energy into the bloom and never bothers to root. Pass those by. Pick the soft green tips every time. Get this one step right, and you're already holding a clean cutting that's ready to go. Step 2. Make the magic water. This is the part I teased at the top, the one thing from my kitchen cabinet. And here it is. It's raw, unfiltered honey. That's the whole secret. The same jar sitting in your pantry right now. Here's the recipe, and the measurement matters. 1 teaspoon of raw honey per 1 cup of room temperature water. Stir it until it's fully dissolved, so you don't have a glob of honey sitting at the bottom of the glass. That's it. 1 teaspoon, 1 cup, stir. Here's the thing about why this works when plain water fails. The thing that rots a cutting is bacteria and fungus breeding in the water and attacking that soft-cut stem. Raw honey is naturally antimicrobial. Its enzymes release tiny amounts of hydrogen peroxide, the same stuff in the brown bottle in your medicine cabinet. And that keeps the water clean enough that the cutting stays alive long enough to actually grow roots. The honey isn't feeding the plant. It's protecting it. That's the whole trick. This is Gloria's method. She's been rooting cuttings in honey water on her San Francisco balcony for over 20 years. Rosemary, basil, mint, all of it, long before I ever met her. The first time she showed me, I'd been buying those little tubs of rooting powder for years and still losing half my cuttings to rot. She handed me a glass of cloudy honey water and told me to throw the powder out. I haven't bought a tub since. 2 things will ruin this, so don't skip them. First, never use hot water. Hot water kills the very enzymes that do the work. They're delicate, and heat destroys them. Room temperature, always. The second, use raw, unfiltered honey, not the processed stuff in the squeeze bear. Most of that's been heated and filtered so hard, there's nothing left in it that helps. Read the label. It should say raw or unfiltered. Stir up that glass, and you've got the same rooting solution Gloria's been using for 2 decades for about $0.05 a batch instead of $6 a tub. Step 3. Place it and set it up. Drop your cutting into the honey water so only the bottom inch or so is submerged, just the cut end and that lower node. The top leaves should sit well above the water line. If a leaf is dangling down into the water, trim it or strip it, because an underwater leaf turns to slime in a couple of days and takes the whole cutting down with it. I use whatever clear glass jar I've got on hand, an old salsa jar, a jam jar, something I pulled out of the recycling bin that morning. Clear glass lets me watch the roots form, which is honestly the best part of the whole thing. It's the same windowsill where I keep green onion ends and lettuce bottoms going in jars of water. The same recycled jar habit that got me into all of this years ago in a Portland apartment. Set that jar in bright, indirect light. A spot near a window that gets plenty of light, but no harsh, direct sun is perfect. You want it warm, somewhere around 70 degrees. That's the sweet spot where roots get going fastest. Here's where people cook their cuttings, literally. They set the jar on a sunny windowsill in direct afternoon sun, because they figure more sun has to be better. It's not. Direct sun heats that little glass of water like a tiny oven, breeds green algae along the inside, and cooks the stem from the bottom up. Bright, but indirect. Off to the side of the window, not pressed up against the glass. Get this step right, and your cutting is sitting pretty, warm, lit, with its cut end bathing in clean honey water. Now the only thing it has to do is grow. Step 4. Maintain it and transplant. This is the easy part, but it's where patience pays off. Every 3 to 4 days, pour out the old honey water and mix up a fresh batch, same 1 teaspoon per cup. Even honey water goes stale eventually, and fresh water keeps the oxygen up and the rot down. While you're at it, give the cut end a quick rinse under the tap. 30 seconds, twice a week, and that's the whole maintenance job. Then you wait. The hardest part of this isn't the growing, it's the waiting. Depending on the plant, you'll see the first little white roots pushing out somewhere between 10 and 21 days. Mint and basil are quick, often inside 2 weeks. Rosemary takes its time, closer to 3. Those first white threads coming off the node are the win you've been waiting for. That's a brand new plant, made from nothing but a scrap of stem and a spoonful of honey. Let those roots grow until they're about 1 to 2 inches long. That's the moment to move into soil. Fill a small pot with damp potting mix. Poke a hole with your finger, settle the roots in, and firm the soil gently around them. Here's the mistake that gets people right at the finish line. They get excited watching those roots and they let them keep growing. 3 inches, 4 inches, a big tangled mess in the jar. Long water roots get brittle, and they snap the second you try to plant them. Then the cutting goes into shock and dies after all that waiting. Move it at 1 to 2 inches. Short, sturdy roots transplant clean and barely notice the change. That's how I ran 11 rosemary cuttings through these exact 4 steps on 1 windowsill last spring, and every single one rooted and potted up. Enough to keep some, pot a few, and still hand a handful to the neighbors. Now, if what I'm showing you today is making sense, and you're starting to realize you've been buying plants you could have rooted for free, here's where I'll point you. I can only show 1 or 2 cuttings per video, but the full A to Z list of what roots in water lives in my book, the 30-day kitchen scrap garden protocol. Chapter 5, the Regrow Encyclopedia, lays out the method, the water level, the cutting angle, and the root stages for herb after herb, with simple diagrams you can follow. It's $17 at backyardbuddybooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. No rush. Take your time pulling it up. I'll wait right here. Phone or laptop, folks. The link's in the description. All right, let's keep going. Let me walk you through the 3 mistakes I see most, because I made every one of them myself. First, leaving too many leaves on the cutting. I get it. The leaves look healthy, and you don't want to strip them. But a cutting with no roots can't support a full head of foliage, so it pours all its energy into those leaves and wilts within days. Strip it down to 2 or 3 leaves at the top, and the cutting puts that energy into roots instead. Second, parking the jar on a hot, sunny windowsill in direct sun. I did this my first year and couldn't figure out why my stems were turning to mush. Direct sun heats the water, breeds green algae on the glass, and slowly cooks the bottom of the stem. Move the jar to bright, indirect light, a foot or 2 back from the window, and the problem disappears. Third, and this one's the quiet killer, never changing the water. Folks set the jar down and forget it for 2 weeks. Even honey water goes stale and slimy after a while. And a slimy jar rots the cutting right at the base before a single root forms. Refresh it every 3 to 4 days. Clean jar, fresh honey water, and your cutting stays firm and white at the bottom the whole way through. Now, I told you at the start, there's one type of cutting that almost never works in plain water, and here's the fix. That troublemaker is woody, hard-stemmed cuttings. Lavender is the worst of them, and older figwood and rosewood are right there with it. Their outer skin is so tough that roots can't break through it, so the cutting just sits in the jar for weeks looking fine, then quietly rots. Gloria showed me the answer on her balcony with a lavender cutting, and it's a trick she calls wounding. Before the cutting goes in the honey water, take a knife or even your thumbnail and scrape a strip of that outer skin off the bottom of the stem about 1 inch long, straight up the side. Underneath, you'll see a thin green layer, the living tissue just under the skin. That's the cambium, the part where roots actually form. Once you open up that strip, the roots push out directly from the wound instead of fighting the skin. The timing tells the whole story. A wounded woody cutting will usually show roots in about 3 to 5 weeks. An unwounded one, in my experience, basically never does. One scrape with your thumbnail is the difference between a rooted lavender plant and a jar of disappointment. Before I let you go, here's where this leads. A rooted rosemary cutting isn't just one plant. It's the start of a plant. Once, harvest, forever supply. And that's the whole idea in Chapter 9 of the book, The Long Game. That chapter walks you through turning cuttings into permanent perennial herbs, rosemary, thyme, and sage, plus fig and grape cuttings, with Gloria's 20-year balcony as living proof you don't need a yard to do it. You'll find it in the 30-day kitchen scrap garden protocol at backyardbuddybooks.com. If you're on the big screen, go ahead and grab your phone and scan that QR code. Take your time finding it. I'm in no hurry. On a phone or laptop already, just tap the link in the description. This is free food forever from a few cuttings on a windowsill. And you really can do this. So that's it. 11 rosemary plants from one parent for the cost of a spoonful of honey and 10 minutes a day. This is what the whole channel is about. Growing real food from things you already have, no fancy gear and no big yard required. Start with one cutting this week. Pick the easiest herb in your kitchen, snip a healthy piece, and drop it in a glass of honey water tonight. And once you've got that going, the same windowsill will regrow green onions and lettuce bottoms right alongside it, so that's a fun one to try next. Drop a note in the comments and let me know which cutting you tried first. I read them all. Until next time, keep growing your own food, my friend.